Black Myth Wukong was my most anticipated game of the year, and many others feel the same way. This was a game that had a lot of hype around it, and typically what happens when a game reaches this level of hype is that it becomes impossible for the game to ever deliver on those expectations. Because people will immediately start going Insano style with unrealistic expectations. When this game drops, it's going to change the gaming industry forever. It's going to get my parents back together after the messy divorce, it's going to find me a wife, and it's going to make me 6 inches taller. Like, calm down, it's a video game, not a fairy godparent, you know what I mean? It just becomes very easy to get lost in the hype train that goes off the rails, so when the title actually does drop, it leads to people being disappointed or underwhelmed with it. However, in the case of Black Myth Wukong, I'm happy to say it actually exceeded my expectations. I've now dumped 30 hours into this puppy here, and I just want to give you my full review on it. Now, I actually haven't even gotten the true ending yet, because there's still a lot of things you have to do to get the secret true ending, which I'm going to go back through and do. But I wanted to give you a full review for now with my thoughts on it, and whether or not it's worth your money. First and foremost, I think all of you know Souls-like is my favorite genre. I just fucking love Souls games. I get so giddy to play them. I get more excited for that than Randy Pitchford does at a squirting competition. And I thought Wukong was going to be a Souls-like title because all of the marketing material kind of gave off that vibe. However, it's not a Souls-like game. It's very clearly Souls-inspired, but it's more akin to something like God of War. Like recent God of War, 2018 and Ragnarok, with Souls elements woven into it. That's like the closest comparison I can make to the combat. But the combat is by far the best part about the game. I'm not disappointed that it's not more of a traditional Souls game. I actually really love the direction they went for the combat. It's not perfect, and I'm going to get into some of the complaints, but overall, it's extremely fun. Now, there is so much progression in this game. There's so many things you can be putting points into to change builds around and all of that. There's 3 stances: smash stance, pillar stance, thrust stance, and there's a lot of depth to what you can put points into. However, the combat itself is functionally going to stay the same no matter what build you're going with. All of your stances all use the same light attacks, for the most part. There is like a spear you can get that changes it around a little bit, but it still plays pretty much the same. What changes and where the variety comes from is through what stances you're using, so that changes your heavy attacks, which cost focus points, and they also introduce a couple of new moves you can do with them in these varied combos. But most of the combat's always going to be revolving around using light attacks to build up focus points and then using heavy attacks for your actual fucking meat, where you're just feeding someone their vegetables. And that's an expression I'm using very generously because every boss in this game has a crazy health pool, except for a few. So you're never exactly fucking anybody. You're not chunking anyone's health unless you have a highly min-maxed build for it. Most of the time, at best, you're feeding them like a single grain of corn. You're not giving anyone a heaping serving of vegetables with your damage, which is fine, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But what I want to talk about with the combat is there is a lot that you can be putting points into. So even outside of like the stances and the different things you can unlock there's a lot of static upgrades, there's a lot of magic upgrades where you can use these spells that really do play a huge role into the way that you can approach these fights. So you can do like a shadow clone jutsu for one if you want to put all your points into that, and you can try and have them be like your little minions that really help you chip away at bosses. You can immobilize them. There's a ring of fire that helps with buffs. There's the misstep, which lets you dodge and go invisible. There's transformations that have a bunch of different ones you can transform into from bosses that you've defeated. There is a lot to the progression system. And then even outside of just those core skills that you can be putting points into, there's gourd upgrades. There's medicine that you can be making. There's builds with the armor that you can be going for, with set bonuses. Like, there's just a lot of things and a lot of time you can spend crafting very interesting builds. I've seen quite a few people say that the combat in this game is shallow, and I have to imagine that's a huge self-report that they didn't get past Chapter 2. The game definitely does start with everything's just light attack, rinse and repeat until you have enough for a focus, and then you'll just drop like a charged heavy smash or a charged pillar stance smash, and that's it. But that's only in the beginning. As you continue to go, like, you're still getting new shit all the way till like the end of the game. So the combat continues to get deeper and deeper the more that you play and the more that you start to experiment. Yes, everything uses the same light attacks, but the way that you can approach combat is always going to be different from player to player. For example, towards the end of the game, I was finally able to complete my mythical lightning staff. And what this would do is it would help my pillar stance, and if I do a 3-focused heavy attack, it'll call down a fucking beam of lightning and do additional damage. So I built around that by introducing a spirit, which I don't even know if I mentioned spirits yet. You can also capture some spirits that'll give you bonuses, and you can use them briefly to do like an attack or a buff or something. And I used the Rat Governor spirit. God bless the Rat Governor, the finest politician in the game. He's bringing down the power of Zeus for you. So the Rat Governor comes out, he shoots lightning, and he improves my thunder damage. So it helped with my lightning staff build. So, like, there's just a lot of ways that you can do different things with the combat. Yes, the light attacks stay the same, but as you get deeper and deeper in the game, and as you explore and unlock new things and experiment with new things, you can find a lot of fun ways of approaching the combat, so it never feels like a slog. It never feels like you're not doing anything different. And especially because in this game, you can respec for free whenever you want. I love that feature. At any point in the game, you can just go to one of your shrines, which basically act as your bonfires for any Souls veterans out there, and you can just choose to reignite the sparks, which lets you reallocate all of your points completely for free. You can also do that for the relics, which give you other permanent bonuses. You can respec all of those for free. You can also do that for your medicines. Well, certain medicines that give you permanent buffs. You can redo all of those for free. So you can truly get fucking wacky with the ways that you build your character. And I really appreciate that. I didn't feel like the combat was shallow at all. The only problem I had with the combat is the camera. Well, actually, there's two. The camera would oftentimes be your biggest enemy. Like, that camera sometimes just has a grudge against you. It wants to give you a fucking wet willy whenever it can. You'll be in the middle of a boss fight and the camera just starts doing this like it's a fucking scene on a Cloverfield. And then your camera will, like, sometimes just go straight into the ground. I had that happen a handful of times. Or even worse, the camera will get stuck in the boss's butt cheeks, because I guess some of the bosses just have gooch physics. So sometimes your camera will just get locked right on the boss's cheeks, and you'll just be staring down the pipe of their poop shooter there like you're giving them a colonoscopy. And then you can't see what moves are coming at you, and it makes it hard to dodge. That's usually reserved for big bosses, which there is a lot of in this game. So that was very frustrating when that happened. Finally, just chipping away at a boss's endless health pool, bringing them to the brink, one pubic hair of health left, and then all of a sudden he kegels my camera. I can't see. He just hits me with the peekaboo and annihilates me. Definitely led to some moments of me just spitting, getting upset. And the other combat-related problem that I was having was some janky hitboxes. There are some bosses in this game, and they're the worst bosses in this game, where you're just hitting at toes. So you have like these skinny chicken-legged bosses, and you can't like hit their body, you have to hit their legs to drop them. And because of these tiny little noodle legs and these itsy-bitsy tootsies, you'll be swinging your light attacks at them, and sometimes it's just not hitting at all. All of your light attacks are missing, so you're not building up focus. When you do get lucky and start hitting them occasionally to build up focus, and you do your, heavy attack like you're doing smash stance, you'll sometimes just completely fucking whiff because it's so skinny, the hitbox is so tight, and there's a little bit of wonkiness to it that you just won't be doing any damage, which obviously doesn't feel good. And there's some bosses that have moves where the hitbox doesn't actually match the visuals. So this was actually a problem with the Yellow Wind Sage, which I know a lot of players were banging their head against a wall against. That's like the first actually challenging boss in the game. And what happens is there's a couple moves where the Wind Sage will throw out a long-ranged attack, and you're seeing it coming the whole way, and you'll dodge it, but the hitbox actually is a little ahead of the projectile. So when you're ready to dodge it and you go for it, you'll sometimes just get hit because you can't time it right because the hitbox is actually ahead of it. And the Yellow Wind Sage also has a really frustrating design where some of the challenge with the boss is that he goes outside of a sand tornado and just starts spamming moves that you can't see coming. And every boss in the game always can skate across the whole arena to hit you with an attack chain. So if he's starting those attacks outside the tornado, you can't really see when it's coming, and you just have to be like split-second reaction to. Which, for your boy, wasn't a huge problem. I got him in 4 tries. But for a couple of friends of mine, they weren't so lucky. Maybe skill issue, maybe not. But the hitboxes are definitely wonky with some bosses. Another notable example is the 100-eyed Taoist. That's towards the end of the game. Well, over halfway through the game, there's a boss that is giant spider body, giant like fucking centaur guy. Looks like something out of the Harry Potter Cursed Forest or whatever that had all those unicorns and shit. And this dude comes out, and you want to get to like the side of him. Oh, it's a centipede body, not a spider body. Excuse me, I didn't mean to offend any spiders out there. But you want to get to like the side of his body so you can start wailing on his legs and not get punished up front. But you can't really run around the side of him because his hitbox is so fucking robust. Like the girth is so crazy that you can't actually run around the side in time because he's tracking you and you can't get around that hitbox fast enough. Sometimes you get lucky and squeeze through it when he throws out an attack, but if you want to actually try and like get behind him, you can't do that super well because the hitbox extends too far. So hitboxes were definitely a problem throughout the game with some of the bosses, but it was never like egregious. Like it was never to the point where I thought it was unfair or broken. It's just one of those things that when it happened, it made me mad in the moment, but it's not something that you can't overcome and learn to deal with the jankiness of. But yes, it isn't perfect. It's not like flawless. So I think combat is the best part about this game. If you're someone that likes high action, nuts to butts, high octane action, this is the game for you. It's a must play for that alone. And I think this game does something very smart, where instead of giving you like a ton of trash mobs to fight through to get to the next boss, where it kind of almost feels like filler, where you're just fighting a bunch of like scraps, you know, this game gives you tons of bosses, oodles. This probably has the most bosses out of any game I've played in recent memory. I can't think of any game that has this many bosses. And there's so many secret bosses too. And I need to give fucking huge praise for like the secret content they have here. I'm gonna glaze the shit out of it for that. I did tons of exploring. I explored every nook and cranny I could find for this game, turned over every goddamn rock looking if there's any gold underneath it. Just all kinds of beautiful little nuggets of lore and treasure throughout these worlds. And they have entire zones that are entirely optional that are huge. Like Chapter 2, for example. There's a quest line you can start with a big pig guy that's slapping at his belly. And if you start his quest line, it unlocks a big area and a lot of stuff to it and a lot of boss fights. Like there's so much depth that you can find through exploring the game. It's amazing. Like I don't know how people are calling this like too linear or not big. This has so much to it, it's very clear you're just not actually exploring it. You are just beelining and saying that. There's so many side bosses, so many side quests that lead to huge areas with massive bosses. It was so refreshing to do these side quests, get this nice reward with either material, weapons, armor, something like that, and fight a fucking awesome boss that had like a really good storyline for the side quest too. Like it was great. So I think that is exceptionally well done here. But what I was trying to say is these are huge zones for the most part, and there is like a lot of like smaller enemies throughout them, and there's some enemies that you can kill and get the spirit of to use on your side if you want to, and that's cool. But it's not just running through a bunch of trash mobs to get to the next boss. There's some trash mobs, yeah, but you can like explore off the beaten path and immediately just find a boss. There are so many in this game. The only other game that I think has this amount of boss fights is probably Elden Ring, and that's great company to be in. Now, I don't think Black Myth Wukong is nearly to the level of Elden Ring or anything, but I do think it's a very good game. Now, like I said, there's a ton of bosses here, and that's the best part of these kind of games, is fighting well-designed, great-looking, badass bosses, and this gives you that in droves. You know, like, you're more likely to find a boss in one of these zones than you are to find, like, a normal enemy. It's so nice, actually. I love that. So now, since we're talking about bosses, I want to give the good and the bad and the super stinky when it comes to some of these boss fights. The good. The bosses are really fucking cool. I love the visuals in this game. I think the design is incredible. Obviously, the game is graphically beautiful. It is a stunning looking game, and the bosses are such a treat to look at. And it feels really rewarding when you just happen to find one or you finish a side quest line for one and get rewarded with a really cinematic, there's some really cool cinematics. In fact, I think my favorite one is actually for a side boss, the Dusk Veil. And that's a totally optional one. Point is, the bosses look amazing. The movesets for most of them, overall, are really cool and feel fair. But there are a couple of bosses in this game that have actual bullshit in their arsenal. So the game overall, I think, is not nearly as challenging as most of the other games in a Souls-like genre, or I don't even think it's as challenging as some of the bosses in God of War 2018 or Ragnarok. I think overall, most players will find this game pretty simple and easy to get through the majority of it, but there are a few bosses throughout that are actually a slog. There's a couple bosses that are just, for lack of a better term, pardon my French, poop. I've already mentioned the Yellow Wind Sage, where a lot of people hate that boss because of obscuring your vision of the moveset, but I actually think the stupidest design for the boss is the Hundred-Eyed Taoist in his second phase. In his second phase, the challenge comes from him reducing your overall stamina by half. I actually think it's more than half. He gives you just enough stamina to roll like twice before getting winded. You start huffing and puffing like me going up 2 flights of stairs. And that's just not fun. That's a really cheap design for a challenge, where the challenge just comes from, oh, he took away like all of my stamina, so I can't fight back that well. And the counterplay to it is by using an item. I don't want to spoil how you beat that boss, but there is like a counterplay to it. But if you don't have that item, if you didn't go out of your way to find and get that item, it becomes an unbelievably obnoxious chore to beat him with like 2 rolls worth of stamina, because then you get maybe like 1 light attack string off and then won't be able to dodge, so then you're just a sitting duck for him to put his cock in. Like, it's not a fun challenge from that design perspective. And I already mentioned some of the bosses that are really tall and you're wailing at their feet. There's never anything fun about that. I've always hated that from a design perspective. Like, sometimes it works. Like, there are a couple bosses like that I think are cool. But for the most part in this game, there's just never anything fun about trying to, like, hit a very small leg enough that they'll fall down so then you can hit them in their body. I just never really like that. But overall, I do think the vast majority, 98% of all boss fights in this game are really fun and feel really good to fight against. Now, I did mention that for the most part the game is on the easier side of a game in this genre, but I wanted to take a quick second here to pay some respect to some of the hardest bosses in this game. Yin Tiger, which is an optional fight where you can challenge a blacksmith that you unlock through a side quest to a challenge where you will fight him for his spirit. And he has, I think, like 3 or 4 different attack chains, all of which have like 10 or 11 moves in them. So you have to dodge or use spells. Well, actually, you can't even use spells most of the time because he has an ability to break out of your immobilize. So if you cast Immobilize, he's just going to teleport out of it instantly, so you won't even get any value out of that. If you try and hide from him using Pillar Stance, he'll instantly counter you with a command grab. That's something I also want to mention. He's not the only one that does this kind of shit. There are bosses in this game where they counter some of what you're doing. It's like they learned from you. So there's another boss, an Inspector, where if you do a Pillar Stance where you try and like wait out or bait out some ground attacks, because Pillar Stance puts you high enough that you'll dodge them, what he'll do instead is he will stop throwing out ground attacks and he'll just do ranged projectiles so he can hit you off Pillar Stance, which is really cool, especially like thematically. It's very cool that the bosses are observing you and learning you. So if you're trying to dodge Yin Tiger on your Pillar Stance, he's going to cast Command Grab and you're going to get one shot for it, which is very cool, and it makes him a very hard boss. And his 10 or 11 attack chains, which he does like 3 of those, he has like 3 different variations of it, are punishing. Like, it took me a long time to beat him. But the boss that actually took me a longer time to beat is Yellow Long. Yellow Long is this dragon guy who has a lightning spear. And in this game, this is universal across all the bosses, when a boss starts using attacks, if you run away from it, you're not safe, Buster. Yeah, just when you thought you were out, they pulled you back in. It's a ruse. They'll do like 4 attacks away from you, and their 5th attack goes across the entire fucking arena, like they just instant transmissioned on you like Goku. Like they go across the entire arena like a goddamn hockey puck, and then hit you with their next 4 attacks, and you thought you were safe by being a mile away. You weren't, bub. It's actually crazy how every boss can do that, but Yellow Long does it best. Because of his spear, everything is sweeping, and everything has a lingering hitbox because of the lightning. So when you're dodging all of his attacks, if you don't double dodge some of them, you still get hit by the ass end of the hitbox. It was super fucking challenging. I switched builds, I think, 4 times to beat him, and it took me like an hour and a half or an hour 40. That is the boss I had spent the longest time on. Now, in other Souls games, I've definitely spent longer on, like, for example, Elden Ring DLC, I spent 3 hours on the final boss there. So it's not to that level of challenge or anything, but there definitely are some bosses that will take you quite a few attempts, and you'll probably have to switch builds a few times throughout, which, you know, for some people might be frustrating, but for me, I didn't mind. Those 2 bosses, the ones I just mentioned, didn't feel like bullshit. Yes, they made me mad, they had me baby raging and whatever, but at the end of the day, there wasn't anything in their moveset that I thought was terribly designed or anything. The only one that I could point to that I thought was a little wonky was for Yellow Long. He has 4 sweeping attacks, and that leaves behind an invisible hitbox sometimes. So that kind of made me mad because it felt like, how was I supposed to know that I'd get hit even after I dodged it because he had like some residue that he crop dusted me with. But yeah, I wanted to mention that real quick. There is one thing though, another thing, that I think a lot of people are going to hate when it comes to fighting some of these bosses. The health pool. That was a complaint of mine for some bosses. Some bosses have more health than others, and the ones that do, like Yellow Long, holy shit, they have a lot of health. Yellow Long was clapping me. Like, you couldn't pull his dick from my butt with the jaws of life. His cock was buried so far up my asshole, it was like Excalibur in the stone. You couldn't pull it from the stone. And a lot of the reason for that was because his health pool was so large. So even after you get like far into the game, the bosses don't feel like you're doing more damage to them. It doesn't feel like you're getting stronger in terms of how hard you're hitting, even though you're upgrading your weapons, you're upgrading your armor, you're adding more points to, you know, flat damage buffs. The boss's health is scaling too. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily scaling or if it just starts super huge, but like you don't do a ton of damage even as you go further and get stronger. So Yellow Long, like, I think when I finally beat him, it was a 9-minute boss fight-ish, something like that. It was 9 minutes, start to finish, of me just punishing him. Like, going as hard as I can on DPS, casting Immobilize off rip, doing Pluck of Many, which is my Shadow Clone Jutsu, transforming into my strongest transform to stack on even more damage, rock soliding all of his moves, which is basically the parry system in this game. It's a spell. You cast rock solid, parry, gives you focus, I'll hit him with a charged heavy. Doing all of that, and still just barely whittling away at his health over the course of like 9 minutes to beat him. So some bosses, I really do think, just have overtuned amount of health. It's not like the moves I have an issue with, it's mainly just some bosses' health is crazy. Now, let's go ahead and move on from combat-related things. I know I've spent a long time on this, on that subject, but that is the main selling point for this game. Most people are going to be interested in Black Myth Wukong because of how fun the combat looks. And let me just assure you, the combat is even more fun to play than it is to watch. I really enjoyed it. I loved how there were just so many boss fights. They were so different from one another for the most part, and it really just felt good. And I spent a lot of time crafting a lot of different builds. Some worked, some didn't, some fumbled, some fucked. It is what it is. It was still a very, very fun experience. I want to get to the story now, because this actually surprised me. The game is obviously based around Journey to the West, and it has some of the most hype cutscenes of the whole year. I love the intro to this game, and I loved the conclusion to this game, and I got the bad ending. I got like the weakest ending, and I still loved how it ended. And the game also does these end of chapter cutscenes, which are fully animated pieces that go for like 5 minutes sometimes. Like these 5 minutes might be exaggeratory. I'm not sure how long they go, but they feel like a long time because you get a lot of content. After each chapter, you get a beautiful animation. And it's not always just like the same style either. There's like a stop motion animation in here too. Like I loved it. It tells a really interesting story. Now, I'm loosely familiar with Journey to the West, like the actual story of it, but there were so many things in here I had no clue on. And there were sometimes I got lost because the story is kind of pieced together in a interesting way that I wasn't expecting, so I kind of did get lost when it came to the lore occasionally, but I was still so invested in the world and the characters and the narrative. It was so fucking good. Like, that shocked me how much I liked the story of the game. And there's so many cutscenes too. There's so much more storytelling in this game than I thought there would be. I thought it would be all combat all the time. It's not. There is a lot of world building and a lot of storytelling, and it is done so well. At least I think it is. I do think I was done a disservice by just playing the English dub, because I don't think all of it had been translated properly. Like, there's so many times a character will just, for some reason, call someone else a rascal or a knucklehead or something, so that's a little cringe with some of the dialogue, but the overall story is really compelling. Like, it's very interesting. I was definitely invested in the narrative. Oh, and I have to mention the music. The music in this game is so good, especially during some of the animated sequences. Fuck me, it was beautiful. There are so many good pieces in this game. I will probably end up downloading the soundtrack. And I don't do that for a lot of games. I do that for some games. My favorite is still Nier. I still think the original Nier has the most beautiful soundtrack ever made. But this game has an incredible score. I want to call attention to that and give some flowers there. They did a great job with the music here. Overall, I just had an incredible time with this game and plan on continuing to play it to get the secret ending. There is one other complaint that I'll go ahead and get out there, and it's both a praise and a complaint. I think overall the levels are really, really cool. I do think most of the levels in this game are super cool. However, there are two instances that I do think they made a misstep. Chapter 6, which is the final chapter, you get the Nimbus Cloud. Awesome. Super hype. However, there's no direction at all. It's a giant open area now, whereas everything else is not really an open area per se. This is. It's just a giant open area, and there's like some big bosses, but there's like a lot of little enemies too. So unless you watch a guide, which I admittedly did, you won't really know what you're supposed to do. There is no direction. There's nothing to point you with a mission. You just have to fucking feel your way around. And that's not exactly fun, especially because it takes a long time to traverse through this huge open area. And there's not a lot to do besides do the right thing in it. So I do think that was a misstep. And I also think Chapter 3 is just way too long compared to everything else. Chapter 3 is significantly longer than every other chapter in this game. It's very good, like it's super good, but I don't know why it's so much longer than all the others. And I just wanted to call attention to those two things. Overall though, like I said, I think the levels in the chapters are really good, but there's definitely some room for improvement there. I think this game is extraordinary, but I do think it has plenty of flaws. I am very pleased with the time I've spent with it. And I definitely think it's worth buying. 100% I think it's worth buying. If you like Souls games, you'll definitely like this one, even though it's not exactly a Souls game. There's Souls elements in there that I'm sure you'll appreciate. If you like very high action games, you're going to love it. Like, I do think this is just a game that a lot of people are going to really, really like. I think it's worth the money. If I was to plug it into the moist meter, I'd give it a very cool 85%. Like, I really think it's a great game. And yeah,